For the first time ever, the Nittany Lions are feeling peachy. On Sunday, the College Football Playoff Committee announced that Penn State is heading to Atlanta, Georgia to face off against the Ole Miss Rebels in their first ever Peach Bowl. Not only is this Penn State's first trip to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, this is the first time the Nittany Lions will face off against the Rebels. Welcome back to Penn State Sports Night. I'm Lauren Harth alongside Cailey, Thalman, and Justin Ciavolella. Penn State will be playing in their second straight New Year's Six bowl game, while Ole Miss is playing in their second under head coach Lane Kifflin. This year's Peach Bowl certainly bodes to be an entertaining, competitive matchup between both these two lost teams. Dare I say you might want to have your Chick-fil-A sauce ready? Now, Cailey, let's start with you. Penn State could not win their two big top 10 matchups against Michigan and Ohio State. What do they need to do differently now that they're playing number 11 Ole Miss?
Well, Lauren, Penn State fans right now are having deja vu because they were in the exact same spot last season. Two-loss team with losses to Michigan and Ohio State, resulting in a good New Year's Six bowl. So Penn State, yet again, is coming out with something to prove, and that is exactly what they're going to have to do against a good Ole Miss team. Now, that being said, Penn State luckily is coming off of their best offensive performance, I believe, maybe with the exception of the Maryland game, but their best offensive performance against Michigan State. Drew Aller looked like his confident, capable self, throwing for 2 touchdowns and almost 300 yards. Nick Singleton was back. I don't know where he's been all season, but he was back that game. He rushed for over 100 yards and had over 60 receiving yards as well. And Kaytron Allen also rushed for over 100 yards. So Penn State looked exceptional offensively in that game. Now, you could argue Michigan State is a weaker team, which they are. So Penn State is expected to do as well as they did. But to come out with that confidence against, even though a weaker team, still a respected team, that was important for Penn State going forward. And defensively, you just can't say enough good things about Penn State's defense. They shut out Michigan State. That's their third shutout of the year. And players like Abdul Carter, Chop Robinson continue to prove themselves. They are scary players to go up against. And if I were Ole Miss's quarterback, I would be scared. Because when you have those players coming for you, that is a dangerous game.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing the Nittany Lions have to do differently than what they've been doing all season because Ole Miss isn't as good as Ohio State. They're not as good as Michigan either. And we'll get down to it later on, but they're just, in my opinion, not really that great of a team anyway when matching up against Penn State. They've had a really good season, don't get me wrong there, but when you put these teams head-to-head, they are not really comparable, at least in my opinion. And for Penn State, you touched on it. The offense has looked different. It's looked different the final 2 weeks of the season. And yes, Drew Aller did get injured in that Rutgers game, but Bo Pribula has taken a bigger role in the offense, especially in that Michigan State game. He was responsible for 2 of the touchdowns, and it's a completely different offense. It's way more dynamic because when you bring in Bo Pribula, the defense has to take that into account while also taking into account Drew Aller's arm, which you saw on the 60-yard touchdown, or 60-yard pass, to Amari Evans in that Michigan State game. And you have to take all this into consideration. Then you get Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen going both over 100 yards in that Michigan State game, and it's complementary offensive football all the way through. And this Ole Miss defense, which we'll touch on momentarily, is not good enough right now, or at least what against top 10 teams, to stop what Penn State did against Michigan State, which was different than really what they were able to do all season because Mike Yurcich was removed from offensive coordinator. He was fired. The co-offensive coordinators, Jaywan Sider and Ty Howell, were able to come in and really dynamicize the offense to an extent it wasn't. And you said it perfectly on the defensive end. There's nothing else the Nittany Lions have to do. Manny Diaz, if he's still at Penn State, because he could end up as a head coach at Duke or JMU or even elsewhere, but if Manny Diaz is still there, this team is going to come in the exact same way they've been playing all season. They've been aggressive. They're top 5 in so many defensive stat categories. Sacks, fewest passing yards allowed, fewest rushing yards allowed, fewest points per game, stuff like that. They're right up in the top 3, really, of all those stat groups that I just named. And I think at the end of the day, the big picture thing here is Penn State has built a culture that doesn't have opt-outs. And we saw that last year in the Rose Bowl. The only 2, Joey Porter Jr. and Parker Washington, were both injury-related. This Penn State team should go full force into this Peach Bowl.
It's definitely, like you guys said, it was their most complete game against Michigan State, both offensively and defensively. There's just no other way to put it. having that it's almost like a newborn offense with the changing an offensive coordinator. When we transition to Ole Miss now, they're kind of a similar story. They lost to both their top 10 ranked opponents, current SEC champion Alabama and runner-up Georgia. Justin, what do we need to see differently from Ole Miss to be improved to compete against this strong Penn State team?
Yeah, well, we'll start on the offensive end for Ole Miss, and at the end of the day, they need to get everything working. They cannot have a one-dimensional offense because this Penn State team is good enough to stop a one-dimensional offense. Now, there's only one team that they weren't able to do that against, and that was Michigan, because the only thing Michigan did in the second half was run the ball. But like I said, Ole Miss isn't Michigan. They're not as good as Michigan. They do have very talented players. Jackson Dart is a phenomenal dual-threat quarterback. He can do it on the air, 20-5 touchdown to interception ratio. He had 377 rush yards to add on 7 touchdowns, and that's just incredible from the quarterback spot. But you can't have Jackson Dart as the only piece of your offense. You need to make sure you get your running backs involved in Quinshon Judkins and as well as Ulysses Bentley IV. You need to get the two of them going, and they both had really good years. Judkins, he was averaging 4.4 yards per carry. As for Bentley, he was going for 5.7 yards per carry. You need to be able to mix up your offense, make it complementary. This way you keep Manny Diaz's defense guessing, because when they don't have to guess, they are such a good defense. And then you flip to their defensive side, and against Georgia, which was arguably the best team they faced all season, because I'll say it, Georgia is a better team than Bama, no matter what the SEC championship game said to us a couple of days ago. But when you look at that, this defense has to shore things up, because we just talked about how good this Penn State offense could be. And this defense lets up over 371 yards per game, 23 points per game. And, well, against Georgia, 52 points and 611 yards, let up. And against Bama, another performance where they let up a lot of points and a lot of yards. That can't happen.
You're completely right. And I've always said SEC football and Big Ten football are very different. The Big Ten is defensive. The SEC is offensive. And Ole Miss has that dynamic offense, I believe. Dart is a dynamic quarterback who can both run the ball and pass the ball very well. You've got 3 wide receivers who are extremely successful, averaging between 13 yards per reception and 18 yards per reception, which completely blows Penn State's receivers out of the water. And if Ole Miss is able to capitalize on those good receivers, they do have a chance to be productive against Penn State's defense. However, you are absolutely right in saying Ole Miss's defense is subpar at best. They're giving up 22.3 points a game, which is terrible. Penn State has given up 22 points only 2 times all season. So if Ole Miss wants a real chance against this Penn State team, their defense is going to have to be absolutely lights out, despite having such a dynamic offense.
You guys spoke to it perfectly. The offense is stellar. Jackson Dart is the playmaker in that. It really is going to come down to his passing and his running. You mentioned the star wide receivers. It's really can Penn State's defense step up and block this team that is different than any other they've faced, and can their defense step up against Penn State's offense? Now, perhaps the most important question, how do you think these two teams match up and who's going to come out on top? Cailey, let's start with you.
Well, Lauren, I think Penn State's defense is the best in the country. I've said that all year, and I will say that again. And I think they can take on any SEC offense, no matter how good that SEC offense is. And I think that will be proven in this Peach Bowl in Atlanta, because Jackson Dart has been sacked 26 times all season, and that is not while facing a Penn State defense. So I think when you have, like I said earlier, players like Adisa Isaac, Curtis Jacobs, Chop Robinson, all of those players coming at him with a weaker O-line, that is not going to bode well for Ole Miss. And I think this is perfect timing for Penn State with their offense just kind of falling into place. So I think Penn State will be feeling just peachy with this one and take it 27-17.
I mean, I hinted at it earlier. I don't think these two teams really, I know they're 10-11 in the nation, but I don't think they really compare at all. I think Penn State, offensively, they have the better players, or maybe the more dynamic offense, I should say, against a defense that we talked about, subpar. I think you said that perfectly. And I think the Penn State defense, it's just as good as Alabama's. It's just as good as Georgia's, if not better. They are the best defense. They're top 2 defense in the nation, and I'd say they're not 2, which means they're the best defense in the nation. And, I mean, I'd go 34-10. I bounced around with the prediction. I thought maybe Penn State could get more, but I just see this. Ole Miss struggled against some subpar opponents. I look at the game against A&M, Arkansas, Auburn, where these were 7-point games against teams that struggled all season. Penn State's a team, they only struggled twice, and it was against Michigan and Ohio State, two of the best in the country. I don't see Penn State really struggling at all in the Peach Bowl.
I think it'll certainly be a competitive one, an exciting one, and I can't wait to see it. Penn State looks to continue their New Year's Six luck after last year's dominating Rose Bowl win against Utah. Ole Miss hopes to bounce back from their heartbreaking Sugar Bowl loss in 2021. We will have to stay tuned for this exciting matchup on December 30th. For Cailey, Thalman, and Justin Ciavolella, I'm Lauren Harth. Thanks for joining us on this edition of Penn State Sports Night, and we'll see you in Atlanta.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into this edition of Penn State Sports Night.
For more content like this, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, give us a like, and follow our socials down below.
And as always, we are
Penn State Sports Night.